The house I grew up in really influenced my path in life. I don't think I would be an architect today if it were not for Gene Leedy. I had the great fortune of being born and raised in a house by Gene Leedy. I had, and growing up in Winter Haven, if you go to the bank, you're going into a Gene Leedy structure. If you go to City Hall, you're going to a Gene Leedy structure. If you're going up to a friend's house, most likely it's a Gene Leedy house. So, that became the normal surroundings for me. Anything else was usually inferior. Well, I feel like I've known Gene Leedy all my life, and he would probably say the same thing. But I think our parents were friends for a long time before that. And growing up, my best friend was Ingram Leedy, Gene's son. So I had constant exposure to Gene for my whole life. I've heard all of his stories, maybe 5 or 6 times each. But, and so, growing up and, spending time over at my friend's house and seeing how Gene Leedy, interacted with, his clients who became great friends, and there were always these great dinners and discussions. And, I think at some point I said, that might be a interesting path for me. What I took away from my experience with him is, how the devil is in the details, a lot of architecture. He really made me realize how important the detailing is. You can have a beautiful, beautiful space or a beautiful building, but if it's not detailed correctly, it's not really a complete work of architecture. Increasingly in our culture and society today, all the buildings look pretty much the same, and probably most of our built environment around us was not designed by architects. Perhaps some developers or builders just went and got some plans off the shelf and put something up, and our zoning laws don't help things look good as well. So when you have buildings that are truly unique and are designed by architects, they really stand out, and they should be appreciated, and they should be preserved to the extent possible. Just because something's old doesn't mean that it's worth preserving. Something should be good to be worth preserving. And traditionally, preservation movements have been, built around older buildings, and modern buildings didn't qualify. But now we're seeing that, some of these classic modern buildings are over 50 years old, and all of a sudden, they're their own little genre worth preserving themselves. And a lot of Gene Leedy's structures are going to fit that bill. Architects, have many roles, and we have to put on many hats. First and foremost, we have, we have a distinction of looking out for the public health, safety, and welfare. The buildings don't collapse around us, so to speak, and that our buildings meet codes and all that stuff. But that's more of the mundane aspect. When a building becomes more than a building and a work of architecture, that's when the architect got it right. And 9 times out of 10, probably more often than that, Gene's buildings are much more than a building. They have a certain inherent quality that elevates it to a work of architecture, and that is worth preserving. My lifelong exposure to Gene's work, the fact that I worked with him for a while, obviously had a profound influence on my own architectural work. And I haven't been practicing too long, but already if you look at my buildings, you can probably see some sort of lineage there, and I'm very proud of that, because there's some architectural concepts and structural expression and the detailing. You can probably see some parallels between Gene's work and what I'm doing right now. I consider Gene much more than a mentor. He's a good friend as well, and part of that is because for that 1 year that I worked with him, probably went to breakfast with him 3 or 4 times every week. Uh, in fact, my friend Ingram would always call me up on the phone. He's like, "Why are you spending so much time with my dad?" And he always had great stories to share and just great anecdotes. And embedded through all of those were instructions and education on architecture. I think when Gene Leedy designs homes, he really gets in the clients' heads real well. And, for families in particular, he knows that privacy is very important. You look at a lot of his homes, there's the courtyard elements that give privacy from the street, but also inside the homes themselves, there's a lot of structure built into privacy, and especially between parents and children. That separation is very important, and as a new father, I know that as well. And from the kids' perspective, it was great having the parents on the other side of the house, and I'm sure the parents thought the same thing from their perspective. For Winter Haven, especially, there are so many examples of his work around here. I think when I was working for Gene Leedy, I counted one time that when he leaves his house and drives the probably 2 miles that it is to his office, he probably passes 20 or 30 of his own designs. And, that's got to be a proud drive to work every morning, except when somebody does something awful to it, 20 years later. But that's a testament to how prolific he was. And his buildings, they're built very well and very strong, and they're always going to be around for a while. Sometimes people will come into a Gene Leedy house or a building and they'll say it's all white, with these little black lines going around everywhere. And, I think that Gene realized, you don't need to force a color into a project. The color is outside those windows, and that's where the color comes in. So, he creates a frame in order to experience life, and that frame is usually a pretty minimal structure. For me as an architect, the single most oftenly asked question is, do you do commercial or residential? And I never know how to respond to that because, I'll do anything as long as the client's good and the project's good. I don't differentiate between, just getting into a niche of doing one type of project. And if you look at Gene's work, he's done it all. I think he takes a lot of pride in his homes, and he should. But he's done a city hall, he's done a bank, he's done a country club, he's done you name it. So in a day and a time that most people think of architects as just a specialty kind of profession, the people that can, apply their talents to the broader scope of building is, and it should be cherished. It's interesting to note that, I grew up in a house that was made of pre-stressed concrete blocks, and just lots of exposed glass. And, for me that was normal. It was an indestructible house, and it was great. And, Gene often used these, commercial, or I'd go beyond that, industrial products and building materials in his homes. And then, I guess come to think of it, my house is built of industrial steel. So, my house that I have now is designed with an industrial steel roof. So I guess I picked that up along the way. Gene Leedy recognizes the role that art plays in life. So a lot of his homes, do have white walls, and it's kind of like a gallery. And, more often than not, there's a nice Sid Solomon painting hanging on the wall, or Elizabeth Clements or something like that. That always, in my mind, seemed to mesh very well. But, those homes are like galleries a lot. Some of them have a Max Strang, yeah. I dabbled for a while. If you look at the paintings that I would do, it was kind of influenced by the abstract expressionism from Sid Solomon and Betty Clements, and ones that I was exposed through Gene Leedy. So there you have another tie-in. Gene Leedy would paint the walls white, when he had to, but a lot of times the color inside the house comes from the color of the material that he used. If it's a gray concrete block or the Ocala block with a little beige hue to it, that became the color. So he would never force a color into a project. He would only use the colors of the available material or white. Look real close in a lot of his projects. He never wants two materials to actually touch. There's always a little 3/4 inch shadow reveal that separates materials when they come together. And that's why when you walk through a house or a project, you'll see these little black lines that kind of envelop you. But its real role is to keep the materials separate, and it works.